Let's just say we have somebody who's 200 pounds, 30% body fat. They want to get to 10% body fat. What's the first thing they need to do?
Okay, so the first thing is we want to optimize health, right? And that is, it sounds so obvious, but it's really not, because the first thing that people think when they're that overweight is like, oh, I just need to get the weight off. So start cutting calories and start moving and start exercising, and that'll make me healthier. And to an extent, that's true, but that's also a slippery slope to head down a path where you are under consuming what your body needs and overtraining, and then you're stuck in this plateau. You're at 30%, you get down to 20, 25, and you can't budge, and you're eating hardly anything, and you're training like crazy. So it's very important that we kind of assess where you're at first before. And so this was a big shift, by the way, in how I would train clients. So my early career, we used to print off a diet. I would assess their body fat percentage, like you just said. What is their goal? Their age, their sex, how much they move, and I would spit off this diet. Like, this is what you should eat. Like, completely through that way, a way of training, and it turned more into this. So if you were that client, I'd say, all right, Doug, for the next week, this is what I want you to do. Before we dive into this drop in this body fat percentage, I actually want you to track your steps, to track your sleep, and to track your nutrition. And what I mean by all three of those is, don't try and impress me. If you don't go for walks every day, don't go fucking take a walk just because I'm having you track it right now. If you don't, if you eat Snickers bars every day at noon, don't stop eating the Snickers bar at noon just because I'm telling you. I want you to do what you've been doing for the last year to 2 years that got us in this place, so I can assess where we're at, and then I could make these micro adjustments. Because believe it or not, reducing down from 30% to 10% is not hard. Now, don't confuse that with it's not hard in the sense of what we need to do. It's hard to be consistent and stick with it and follow it through, right? But as far as the principles, the things that we're going to do, it's actually not as hard as you would think it is. Getting below 10 is when things get really challenging and really tough as far as tweaking macros and getting crazy. So right now, what I want is I want you to track those three things, and I want you to show me what you're doing. Now, what I found over all the years of doing this is that there's almost always something that jumps right out at me nutritionally, right? So, over 65% of the people are deficient in magnesium. More than half the people aren't getting enough vitamin D. Almost everybody is under consuming the amount of protein they need for their body. Most people are missing in fiber. Most people are over consuming in sugar, right? So I have all these things, and these are all kind of like levers that I want to be able to pull over the course of the next, say, 2 or 3 months with this person. And the first one I'm going to do, and this is then there's a psychological piece to this, is I'm actually going to tell them to go get things before I tell them to take away things. And that might sound crazy. So let's pretend you wrote your diet down, and then there's McDonald's, 3 times, and an ice cream a couple times in there. And I don't, and those are obvious things that you probably know, and I know, that are not ideal to diet. But for psychological reasons, I'm not going to say, okay, Doug, cut this, and this all out of your diet. I'm actually going to look at the things that you're missing, which is almost always, like I said, there's always lack of probably vitamin D, lack of fiber, lack of protein. And I'm going to pick like one of them. It's almost always protein. And I'm like, all right, Doug, this is what I want you to do. I want you to hit your body weight in grams of protein, whatever your goal body weight is in grams of protein. So if you're a 200 and say 50-pound person and you're overweight and you say, I want to be 190 pounds, we're going to get 190 grams of protein every single day. And I'm going to tell you to go get that. And that's all I want to focus on first. Now, why do I do that? If I tell a client to do that, and I'm not telling them they can't have these other things, there's a psychological game that I'm playing that they don't realize. I'm playing chess and they don't realize it. Is I know that if I tell them they can't have something, we are wired to rebel. And so if they feel like they're restricting and they can't, and they say those things, oh, my trainer said I can't have this, I can't do this. They might have the discipline to stick to that for a while, but eventually they'll hit a point where naturally they'll want to rebel. Versus if I say, hey, Doug, you got to hit your protein intake. That's all I want you to focus on every day. Let's be consistent with that. Let's not miss that. What I know will happen is it is extremely difficult to hit your protein intake every single day while also consuming all this other, because all that other fills up your calories, fills up your diet, and you end up lacking in the nutrients like protein that your body needs. And so, by me simply telling you to go after this protein intake, I know that naturally it's going to cut that out. And I know the power, the psychology of not telling you can't have those things, but just having you focus on it. It's so magical how this happens, right? So that's like step one. And right away, if we're coupling that with lifting weights, and I normally will start this person off with 3 times a week, full body training. Just and there again, there's some psychology to that also, right? Like I know that in the course of the next year that we're going to be training together, there's going to be days that that person misses or there's inconsistencies. And I know if I'm hitting the body full time, 3 times a week, even if it was a rough week and we only get there 2 times a week, we're still hitting the entire body twice. And so all those muscles are getting worked. All those muscles are getting a signal sent to them that they need to develop, they need to grow or sustain. And so I know that that's one of the better ways to start almost anybody off with their training. So 3 days a week, full body training, and we're gonna hit the protein intake. That literally is gonna take that person in the first month 30% down like 5, 6%. You'd be blown away just that alone. And then I'm looking at the other things nutritionally. I'm gonna go, okay, let's add 2 bowls of your favorite greens, right? You like Brussels sprouts, you like asparagus, whatever it is. Again, another strategy of me cleaning the diet up by adding things in there. I'm not telling them they can't have the bag of chips with their sandwich. All I'm saying is, hey, we need to get this bowl of vegetables also. We need to hit that protein intake now. Those are your 2 targets. And I'm starting to add things into this diet, knowing it's naturally kind of carving off all these things while I'm also lifting weights, sending a signal to the body to train. Mind you, I'm also considering I don't want to necessarily put this person in a major caloric restriction either. Like, I actually don't even want to manage calories quite yet. I know they're naturally going to get managed by changing their food choices because eating 6 to 8 ounces of meat to get to their protein intake is way less calories than them eating a bag of Lay's chips that is tons of calories, tons of carbs, and saturated fat, and hardly any protein. And when they get that out of the diet and they replace it with that steak, it's like they get this fulfilling high protein steak, and yet they don't get all these extra calories. So I already know that telling them to go after these foods without worrying about managing calories is going to naturally kind of shift the calories in the right place. Again, playing the psychological game to first hit that initial bump. So that's kind of where we start to get the first 5 to 8% body fat after that. Next, I'm going to start to dive into like their movement. Like I had them track those steps, so I have an idea. The average person, by the way, doesn't get more than 4,500 steps a day. That's the average person. Very rarely I will ever assess somebody and they're like doing 10,000 steps or more already. Like that's an anomaly. They're like a referee, they walk to work, or it's not normal, right? It's not normal to have somebody 30% overweight and also stepping 10,000 times. It happens, but it's rare. So that person's normally around 4,000 to 5,000 steps a day at most on average. Then I'm going to start getting them just to walk more. And I normally like to move it in increments of 1,000 to 2,000 steps, depending on where they're currently at. So now I'm going to get them to move a little bit more through steps. And we're hitting the protein intake. We're hitting our fiber intake. We're training 3 days a week. We're starting to build some muscle. If I've done a really good job, the scale doesn't move much. So with this person who's this overweight, after 30 to 45 days down the road, they're normally, by the way, discouraged. Adam, I haven't lost any weight on the scale. I'm still 200 something pounds, and they're frustrated. But when I test their body fat percentage, if I did a really good job, I've already dropped down 3 to 5 to 8% body fat in this short period of time, but the scale hasn't moved, which means that I've built 4 or 5 pounds of muscle and I've lost 4 or 5 pounds of fat, and then their scale has stayed the same. I actually only want to use the scale for me, not for them, to know if I need to make any sort of calorie adjustments. That is, if I see someone drop too much weight too fast, then I actually will pivot, and then I'll tell them to add even more calories because I don't want to see this dramatic loss. And some people might be going, what? That's what this guy is 30% body fat. They need to lose all this weight. Why would you not want? Well, again, our goal right now is to change body composition, to reduce body fat. And part of that process, I would like to build muscle along the way because that's only going to help our metabolism and only make the overall fat loss journey that much easier. If I just cut calories, move more, train hard, sure, I'll get a faster drop initially, but then your metabolism will adapt and then we'll have very little where to go. Versus if I don't move the scale much, but I add some muscle and I do lose some fat. So the scale weight stays the same, but I've added 5 pounds of muscle and I've lost 5 pounds of fat. That's a huge success after 30 to 45 days of training. Even 2 months. That's a massive success to have shifted our body composition that much, but not move that much on the scale. And that'll normally go 5-8% doing that process. And then after that, then it's getting them to gradually step more and move more, and over time, subtly getting their strength up, because that's going to increase volume in their training, right? So if I can add 5 or 10 pounds to the bar every couple of weeks on their bench press, their squat, or their deadlift, that's adding volume. That increased volume will burn more calories, will send a signal to build more muscle, will acquire more calories that their body needs, which will in turn keep them heading in that lower body fat percentage. And it's literally that game all the way to 10%. It is constantly just adding a little more activity, a tiny bit more intensity. And that one way to increase intensity would be getting stronger in the gym, adding more weight to the bar, and adding foods to the diet. That's the one that really blows people away, where they think that doesn't make sense. Like, I'm trying to lose body fat, but it is. It's adding foods that your body, what you should be eating. And what does that look like at the end? It's whole foods. If I'm at a place with this client where I have slowly added to their diet, and now let's say 30, 45 days, I have them assess and go, write down everything you ate this week. If I did a really good job of slowly adding foods, they'll look down at it and they're eating 4 to 6 times a day, depending on how hungry, how big, how much they're moving a day, 4 to 6 times a day. And, big portion of meat, nice serving of rice, sweet potato, yams, quinoa, something like that, and a good serving of vegetables. And they're doing that 4 to 6 times a day, and it's all whole food. And they're satisfied. They don't feel like they're starving the body. They don't feel that. In fact, many times they feel like they're eating a ton of food and they can't believe it. If I've done a good job too with balancing that out right all along the way, they feel the appetite increasing because they're building muscle. And you can easily take that person from 30 down to 10% over the course of a good amount of time. That's a 6 month journey, 6 to 8 month journey doing it that way. And if somebody is in a metabolic healthy position without any sort of other things going on, right? Like, and by the way, we started this conversation with optimizing health first, and we didn't address sleep yet. But if I had somebody who is only resting or sleeping 6 hours a night or something like that, that throws a whole wrench in all of this. And so it's important that, even though we're talking about nutrition and exercise, what they should do there, if I'm not paying attention to the other stress buckets that they have in their life, then I'm also doing a disservice, and there's a chance that this formula doesn't work. And it's not because this formula doesn't work because it's not proven or it's not the right path. It's that those things take a priority. Like, if you're only sleeping 6 hours a day and your body's stress hormones and hormones are all out of whack, well, then the body's not going to respond. It's not going to build muscle like it's supposed to. It's not going to burn body fat like it's supposed to. And so we have to address those things. So making sure that I'm speaking to them getting good sleep, making sure they're managing their stress, they're eating whole foods, they're adding the things that their body needs to their diet, they're strength training 3 times a week. And that is a recipe for 30% to nice and gradually go. And by the way, you didn't hear me say weigh your food out. You don't have to get crazy about tracking. The 30 to 10% journey is literally looks like that. The 10% to get me ready for stage. Now we're getting the scale out. Now we're getting granular with the macros. We are really pushing intensity in the gym and scaling volume over time. Like, the work to go from 10% to 5% is a whole nother world than getting somebody from 30%, which is a lot of unhealthy people, down to 10%. And 10% is a very reasonable. And I'm assuming we're talking about a male, because yeah, yeah.
So for people like you and I, we can see the progress of a client or the progress of somebody trying to do this when they sometimes can't because they're used to measuring progress by the scale. And we've heard you kind of mentioned this, that somebody might be dropping body fat, getting stronger, but because they don't feel like they're quote unquote lighter, they don't feel like they're making progress.